When you hear the words British royalty, certain images probably come to mind: majestic crowns, royal ceremonies, and pale-skinned monarchs seated on golden thrones. But what if I told you that history may not be as clear-cut as the paintings on the palace walls? Buried in the footnotes of British history is a figure many people have never heard of, a woman whose presence in the royal family challenges everything we thought we knew about race, royalty, and representation. Her name, Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, the wife of King George III, a woman who has captured the interest of many historians and researchers, largely because of her distinct features, which set her apart from other members of the royal family at the time. Could it be true that Queen Charlotte had African ancestry? Could she truly have been the last Black Queen of England? How accurate are these claims? Is it historical fact or just folklore? Was Queen Charlotte genuinely of African descent, or has modern storytelling reimagined her legacy through a different lens? In this video, we're diving deep past the myths, the conspiracy theories, and even the royal silence to uncover the truth about the woman who may have redefined what royalty really looks like. Right before we begin, you can support our efforts by clicking on the thumbs up button in front of this video. Share this video to all across the globe, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, in order to support the continued telling of our untold Black history. Now, without further ado, let us delve right in. Queen Charlotte, the wife of King George III of England, is a direct descendant from Margarita de Castro y Sousa, a member of a Black branch of the Portuguese royal family. The mystery surrounding Queen Charlotte's possible African ancestry was, interestingly, brought to light during a separate investigation into the imagery of the Black Magi featured in several 15th century Flemish paintings of the Christmas story. Art historians noted that the depictions of these African figures were remarkably realistic, showing accurate skin tones and facial bone structure, which led them to suggest that the artists must have used real-life models of African descent. They argued that such detail would have been impossible to capture without first-hand observation. Further research pointed to the likelihood that these models were members of the Portuguese de Sousa family, the same noble lineage connected to Queen Charlotte. Historical records show that several members of this family accompanied their cousin, Princess Isabella of Portugal, when she traveled to the Netherlands in 1492 to marry Philip the Good, Duke of Burgundy. At least 492 lines of descent can be traced from Queen Charlotte through her triple ancestry to Margarita de Castro y Sousa, ultimately linking her to Martim Afonso de Sousa Chichoro, the illegitimate son of King Afonso III of Portugal and his Moorish mistress, Madragana, also known as Oruana. Interestingly, in a royal gene pool already limited by inbreeding, it was through Martim Afonso's wife, Inés de Valadares, that Queen Charlotte is believed to have inherited most of her African and Islamic ancestry. The African characteristics evident in many of Queen Charlotte's portraits held political significance. At that time, royal portrait artists were expected to idealize their subjects, especially women, softening or omitting any features that did not conform to the era's beauty standards. Yet, Queen Charlotte's features were often portrayed with striking accuracy. Sir Allan Ramsay, who painted the majority of her portraits, produced the most distinctly African representations of the Queen. At that time, Ramsay was known for his anti-slavery views and his strong personal ties to the movement. He was married to the niece of Lord Mansfield, the British judge whose landmark 1772 ruling helped pave the way toward the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. Notably, by the time Ramsay was commissioned to paint Queen Charlotte, he was already, through marriage, the uncle of Dido Elizabeth Bell, the mixed-race great-niece of Lord Mansfield, who was raised in aristocratic British society. Given the social and political context, particularly among the upper circles sympathetic to abolition, it would be unlikely that the Queen's African features held no meaning. In fact, they may have subtly served the abolitionist movement, offering a quiet but powerful statement against racial inequality in Britain at the time. Lord Mansfield's black grandniece, Dido Elizabeth Bell, née Lindsay, was the subject of at least 2 formal, full-size portraits. These artworks, clearly influenced by or intended to appeal to abolitionist sympathies, portrayed the celebrated and unusually equal relationship between Dido and her white cousin, a powerful visual statement in an era defined by racial and social hierarchies. It is perhaps this deliberate and symbolic style of portraiture that leads some to believe Queen Charlotte's coronation portrait, copies of which were distributed across the British Empire, was more than a mere royal likeness. Given the social and political environment, and considering the values held by artist Sir Allan Ramsay, it's likely the portrait reflected a subtle but intentional stance on slavery, at least among the intellectual and abolitionist circles to which Ramsay belonged. On the American side of the Atlantic, the claim that the Queen of England was a woman was strategically used as propaganda by Vice Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane during the War of 1812. He employed the slogan to encourage enslaved African Americans to defect to the British, promising freedom in exchange for their support. Over 4,000 enslaved people escaped as a result of the campaign, making it the largest emancipation in the United States before the Civil War. Credit for the early research into Queen Charlotte's genealogy is largely owed to the history department at McGill University. Notably, Dr. Joyce Hemlow, director of the Burney Project, which focused on the prolific 19th century diarist Fanny Burney, a former secretary to the Queen, played a key role. Dr. Hemlow obtained from Alwyn Hedley, the most recent biographer of Queen Charlotte in 1975, at least half a dozen quotes from the Queen's contemporaries describing her features. Perhaps the most striking of these references came from the royal family's physician, Baron Stockmar, whose autobiography includes the remark that Queen Charlotte had a true mulatto face, a description that, though outdated and offensive by today's standards, was considered scientific at the time and offers insight into how her appearance was perceived by those around her. Perhaps the most literary reference to Queen Charlotte's African heritage appears in a poem written in her honor at the time of her wedding to King George III, and again during the coronation celebrations 2 weeks later. Descended from the warlike Vandal race, she still preserves that title in her face. Though shown their triumphs o'er Numidia's plain, and Elysian fields their name retain, they but subdued the southern world with arms. She conquers still with her triumphant charms, O born for rule, to whose victorious brow the greatest monarch of the North must bow. The poem's reference to King George as the monarch of the North is a symbolic contrast to Charlotte, who is framed as Queen of the South. In biblical terms, this alludes to the Black Queen of Sheba, and by extension, to King Solomon, drawing a poetic connection between Charlotte and African royalty. Also, it's worth noting that in 1956, 3 years after Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, the Crown acknowledged both her Asian and African ancestry. Her African lineage in particular was traced through Zaida, the wife of Alfonso VI of Castile. This was part of an apologia that defended her position as head of the British Commonwealth and as mother of a quarter of the population of the world. The reference appeared in a work titled Blood Royal, authored by Sir Rupert Iane Moncrieff and Don Pottinger. Meanwhile, the whitewashed autobiography of Queen Charlotte states that she was born on the 19th day of May, 1744, and she was the youngest daughter of Duke Charles Louis Frederick of Mecklenburg, Prince of Mirau, who lived from 1708 to 1752, and his wife, Princess Elizabeth Albertine of Saxe-Hildburghausen, who lived from 1713 to 1761. Mecklenburg-Strelitz was a small North German duchy in the Holy Roman Empire. The children of Duke Charles were all born at the Unteres Schloss, Lower Castle, in Mirau. According to diplomatic reports at the time of her engagement to George III in 1761, Charlotte had received a very mediocre education, and contemporary Britons, including Elizabeth Montag, who expressed anxiety about the supposed provinciality of Charlotte's upbringing. Her parents hired notable individuals to tutor their children, among them Gottlob Burchard Gensmer and Friederike Elisabeth von Grabo. Charlotte received instruction in literature, botany, natural history, and languages including French, Italian, and Latin. She was also taught traditional pursuits for upper-class girls, including embroidery, dancing, singing, household management, and religion, the latter taught by a priest. Charlotte was also taught to play the harpsichord by composer Johann Georg Linnecke. The family lived a modest life at Mirau. Only after her brother Adolphus Frederick succeeded to the ducal throne in 1752 did Charlotte gain any experience of princely duties and of court life. When George III succeeded to the throne of Great Britain upon the 1760 death of his grandfather, George II, he was 22 years old and unmarried. His mother, Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, and his advisors were eager to have him settled in marriage. Charlotte was not originally considered as a potential bride, but the Hanoverian minister in London, Baron Philip Adolphus von Munchausen, suggested her as a candidate, likely due to the positive relations between Hanover and Mecklenburg-Strelitz. The 17-year-old Charlotte appealed as a prospective consort, partly because she had been brought up in an insignificant North German duchy and therefore would probably have had no experience or interest in power politics or party intrigues. That proved to be the case. To make sure, George III instructed her shortly after their wedding not to meddle, a precept she dutifully followed. The king announced to his council in July 1761, according to the usual form, his intention to wed the princess, after which a party of escorts, led by the Earl Harcourt, departed for Germany to bring Princess Charlotte to England. They reached Strelitz on the 14th day of August 1761 and were received the next day by Duke Adolphus Frederick IV, Charlotte's brother, at which time the marriage contract was signed by him on the one hand and Lord Harcourt on the other. Charlotte's mother had died on June the 29th after giving encouragement to the betrothal following a correspondence with George III's mother, Princess Augusta. 3 days of public celebrations followed, and on the 17th day of August 1761, Charlotte set out for Britain, accompanied by Adolphus Frederick and the British escort party, among them one of Charlotte's new ladies of the bedchamber, Elizabeth Hamilton, 1st Baroness Hamilton of Hamilton. On August the 22nd, they reached Cuxhaven, where a small fleet awaited to convey them to England. The voyage was extremely difficult. The party encountered 3 storms at sea and landed at Harwich only on the 7th day of September. They set out at once for London, spent that night in Witham, at the residence of Lord Abercorn, and arrived at 3:30 p.m. the next day at St. James's Palace in London. They were received by the king and his family at the Garden Gate, which marked the first meeting of the bride and groom. At 9:00 p.m. that same evening, on the right day of September 1761, within 6 hours of her arrival, Charlotte was married to George III. The ceremony was performed at the Chapel Royal, St. James's Palace, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Secker. Only the royal family, the party who had traveled from Germany, and a handful of guests were present. George III and Charlotte's coronation was held at Westminster Abbey a fortnight later on September 22nd, after a brief honeymoon at Richmond Lodge. Upon her wedding day, Charlotte spoke little English. However, she quickly learned the language, albeit speaking with a strong German accent. One observer commented,
"She is timid at first, but talks a lot when she is among people she knows."
Less than a year after their marriage, on August 12, 1762, Queen Charlotte gave birth to her first child, a son, the Prince of Wales, who would one day ascend the throne as King George IV. It was the beginning of a long royal legacy, and her role as both queen and mother was now fully underway. Their firstborn was George. Prince of Wales was followed by Prince Frederick in 1763, who held the title Duke of York and Albany. Next came Prince William, born in 1765, who would eventually become King William IV. In 1766, their first daughter, Princess Charlotte, known as the Princess Royal, was born. Prince Edward, born in 1767, became the Duke of Kent and was the father of the future Queen Victoria. Then came Princess Augusta Sophia in 1768, followed by Princess Elizabeth in 1770. Prince Ernest, born in 1771, became the Duke of Cumberland and later ruled as King of Hanover. Prince Augustus Frederick, born in 1773, was given the title Duke of Sussex, while Prince Adolphus, born in 1774, became the Duke of Cambridge. The family also included Princess Mary, born 1776, later Duchess of Gloucester, and Princess Sophia, born in 1777. Their youngest sons, Prince Octavius, born 1779, and Prince Alfred, born 1780, both sadly died young. Lastly, Princess Amelia, their youngest child, was born in 1783. She remained especially close to her father throughout his life. St. James's Palace functioned as the official residence of the royal couple, but the king had later purchased a nearby property, Buckingham House, located at the western end of St. James's Park. More private and compact, The new property stood amid rolling parkland not far from St. James's Palace. Around 1762, the king and queen moved to this residence, which was originally intended as a private retreat. The queen came to favor this residence, spending so much of her time there that it came to be known as the Queen's House. Indeed, in 1775, an Act of Parliament settled the property on Charlotte in exchange for her rights to Somerset House. Most of the couple's 15 children were born in Buckingham House, although St. James's Palace remained the official and ceremonial royal residence. During her first years in Great Britain, Charlotte's strained relationship with her mother-in-law, Augusta, caused her difficulty in adapting to the life of the British court. Augusta interfered with Charlotte's efforts to establish social contacts by insisting on rigid court etiquette. Furthermore, Augusta appointed many of Charlotte's staff, among whom several were expected to report to Augusta about Charlotte's behavior. Charlotte turned to her German companions for friends, notably her close confidant Juliane von Schwellenberg. Charlotte's personal correspondence with her brother Charles II, Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, revealed the depth of her loneliness and of her frustration with the regulations of royal life. Meanwhile, the king spent much of his time enjoying country pursuits and horseback riding. He preferred to keep his family's residence in the quieter, rural areas of Kew and Richmond whenever possible. He favored an informal and relaxed domestic life, to the dismay of some courtiers more accustomed to displays of grandeur and strict protocol. Lady Mary Coke was quite upset when she heard that, in July 1769, the king, Queen Charlotte, her brother Prince Ernest, and Lady Effingham went for a walk through Richmond without any servants. She didn't think it was appropriate, saying,
"I don't think it's proper for a queen to walk through town without an escort."
From 1778, the royal family spent much of their time at a newly constructed residence, the Queen's Lodge at Windsor, opposite Windsor Castle, in Windsor Great Park, where the king enjoyed hunting deer. The Queen was responsible for the interior decoration of their new residence, described by a friend of the royal family and diarist Mary Delaney.
The entrance into the first room was dazzling, all furnished with beautiful Indian paper, chairs covered with different embroideries of the liveliest colors, glasses, tables, sconces, in the best taste. The whole calculated to give the greatest cheerfulness to the place.
Charlotte treated her children's attendants with friendly warmth, which is reflected in this note she wrote to her daughter's assistant governess, Mary Hamilton.
My dear Miss Hamilton, what can I say? Not much indeed. But to wish you a good morning. In the pretty blue and white room where I had the pleasure to sit and read with you The Hermit, a poem which is such a favorite with me that I have read it twice this summer. Oh, what a blessing to keep good company. Very likely I should not have been acquainted with either poet or poem was it not for you.
Charlotte did have some influence on political affairs through the king. Her influence was discreet and indirect, as demonstrated in the correspondence with her brother Charles. She used her closeness with George III to keep herself informed and to make recommendations for offices. Apparently, her recommendations were not direct, as she on one occasion, in 1779, asked her brother Charles to burn her letter because the king suspected that a person she had recently recommended for a post was the client of a woman who sold offices. Charlotte particularly interested herself in German issues. She took an interest in the War of the Bavarian Succession, which started in 1778 and ended in 1779, and it is possible that it was due to her efforts that the king supported British intervention in the continuing conflict between Joseph II and Charles Theodore of Bavaria in 1785. Some contemporaries, including Charlotte Papendiek, one of Queen Charlotte's attendants, believed that King George III first showed signs of mental illness in 1765. However, the royal governess, Lady Charlotte Finch, recorded that the king was simply ill with a fever. Unlike Mrs. Papendiek, who was not present in the royal household in July 1765, Lady Charlotte was there at the time and had first-hand knowledge of the king's condition. In her memoirs, Mrs. Papendiek also claimed that Princess Augusta tried to keep Queen Charlotte unaware of the king's illness in hopes of positioning herself as regent. That same year, the Regency Bill of 1765 was passed, stating that if the king were to become permanently unfit to rule, Queen Charlotte would serve as regent until the Prince of Wales came of age. King George III's episode of physical and mental illness began in October 1788 and lasted until March 1789. Queen Charlotte was deeply distressed by the sudden change in her husband's behavior. Francis Burney, a writer and one of the Queen's attendants at the time, recalled overhearing her quietly moaning in a tone of despair,
"What will become of me? What will become of me?"
One night, after the king collapsed, Charlotte refused to be left alone with him and firmly insisted on having her own bedroom. When the physician, Dr. Richard Warren, was called in, she was neither informed of his visit nor given the opportunity to speak with him about the king's condition. When the Prince of Wales informed Queen Charlotte that King George III was to be moved to Kew and suggested that she relocate either to Queen's House or Windsor, she firmly insisted on accompanying her husband. She told her son,
"Where the king is, there I shall be."
However, despite her wishes, Charlotte and her daughters were taken to Kew separately and kept secluded from the king during his illness. Although they visited him regularly, the encounters were often uncomfortable, as the king, in his unstable state, would cling to them tightly and refuse to let them go. During the king's illness in 1788, tensions rose between the Queen and the Prince of Wales. Both seemed to suspect the other of attempting to gain power through the regency, should the king be declared permanently unfit to rule. In the Regency Bill of 1789, the Prince of Wales was designated to become regent should King George III be declared permanently insane. However, the bill also placed the king himself, along with his court and minor children, under Queen Charlotte's guardianship. This arrangement sparked significant tension between Charlotte and her son. During one heated exchange, he accused her of siding with his political enemies, while she retorted by calling him an enemy of the king. Their feud became public when Charlotte refused to invite the prince to a concert celebrating the king's recovery, an act that caused a national scandal. During this time, satirical prints harshly caricatured Charlotte, portraying her as an unnatural mother and a mere puppet of the prime minister. In January 1798, the Times accused the political opposition of launching a most scurrilous attack on the Queen, not only through private conversation but through the press aligned with their interests. Eventually, in March 1791, Queen Charlotte and the Prince of Wales reconciled, a move initiated by the Queen herself. However, the impact of the king's illness from 1788 to 1789, along with the intense public criticism she faced during that period, left a lasting mark on Queen Charlotte. Her personality changed. She developed a severe temper, withdrew from public life, and even lost interest in the musical performances she once loved. Her relationships with her adult children also grew strained, further isolating her during the later years of her life. Starting in 1792, Queen Charlotte found some relief from her growing worries about the king's health by focusing on the planning and decoration of Frogmore House, a new residence for herself, located in Windsor Home Park. However, when King George III's mental health declined again in 1804, it caused a deep rupture in their marriage. Despite the pleas of her daughters and the king's physicians, Charlotte kept her distance. She moved into a separate bedroom, took her meals apart from the king, and avoided spending time alone with him. Before the king's illness, Queen Charlotte and King George III were avid music connoisseurs, with a particular appreciation for German composers, most notably George Friedrich Handel, whose works they deeply admired and regularly celebrated. In April 1764, the prodigious Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, then just 8 years old, arrived in Britain with his family as part of their grand tour of Europe. They remained in the country until July 1765. On May 19, the Mozarts were summoned to court, where young Mozart performed for a small royal audience between 6 and 10 o'clock. At the time, Johann Christian Bach, the 11th son of Johann Sebastian Bach, served as music master to the Queen. He challenged Mozart by presenting him with complex works by Handel, J.S. Bach, and Carl Friedrich Abel, all of which the boy played at sight, astonishing everyone present. Mozart even accompanied the Queen in an aria she sang and later performed a flute solo. Charlotte was an amateur botanist who took a great interest in Kew Gardens. In an age of discovery, when such travelers and explorers as Captain James Cook and Sir Joseph Banks were constantly bringing home new species and varieties of plants, she ensured that the collections were greatly enriched and expanded. Her interest in botany led to the South African flower, the bird of paradise, being named Strelitzia reginae in her honor. Charlotte has also been credited with introducing the Christmas tree to Britain and its colonies. Initially, Charlotte decorated a single yew branch, a common Christmas tradition in her native Mecklenburg-Strelitz, to celebrate Christmas with members of the royal family and the royal household. She decorated the branch with the assistance of her ladies-in-waiting, and then had the court gather to sing carols and distribute gifts. In December 1800, Queen Charlotte set up the first known English Christmas tree at Queen's Lodge, Windsor. That year, she held a large Christmas party for the children of all the families in Windsor and placed a whole tree in the drawing room, decorated with tinsel, glass, baubles, and fruits. John Watkins, who attended the Christmas party, described the tree in his biography of the Queen.
From the branches of which hung bunches of sweetmeats, almonds and raisins in papers, fruits and toys, most tastefully arranged, the whole illuminated by small wax candles. After the company had walked round and admired the tree, each child obtained a portion of the sweets it bore, together with a toy, and then all returned home quite delighted.
After the Queen's party, the practice of decorating a tree became popular among the British nobility and gentry, and later spread to the colonies. Among the royal couple's favored craftsmen and artists were the cabinet maker William Weil, silversmith Thomas Hemming, the landscape designer Capability Brown, and the German painter Johann Zoffany, who frequently painted the king and queen and their children in charmingly informal scenes, such as a portrait of Charlotte and her children as she sat at her dressing table. In 1788, the Queen visited the Worcester porcelain factory, founded in 1751, and later to be known as Royal Worcester, where Queen Charlotte ordered a porcelain service that was later renamed Royal Lily in her honor. Another well-known porcelain service designed and named in her honor was the Queen Charlotte pattern. The Queen founded several orphanages, and in 1809, she became the patron, providing new funding, of the General Lying-in Hospital, a hospital for expectant mothers. It was subsequently renamed as the Queen's Hospital, and is today the Queen Charlotte's and Chelsea Hospital. Up until 1788, portraits of Queen Charlotte often depicted her in warm, maternal poses with her children, appearing youthful and content. However, the year the king fell ill marked a turning point. While historians now believe he may have suffered from porphyria, others have suggested bipolar disorder as a possible cause of his condition. A portrait of Charlotte by Sir Thomas Lawrence, painted around this time, reflects a noticeable shift. She appears significantly older and more burdened. Charlotte Papendiek, the assistant keeper of the Queen's wardrobe, noted the change, writing that the Queen was much changed, her hair quite gray. The French Revolution of 1789 probably added to the strain that Charlotte felt. She had maintained a close relationship with Queen Marie Antoinette of France. Charlotte was 11 years older than Marie Antoinette, yet they shared many interests, such as their love of music and the arts, about which they were both enthusiastic. Never meeting face to face, they confined their friendship to pen and paper. Marie Antoinette confided in Charlotte upon the outbreak of the French Revolution. Charlotte had organized apartments to be prepared and ready for the refugee royal family of France to occupy. She was greatly distraught when she heard the news that the King and Queen of France had been executed. Charlotte died on November 17, 1888, at the age of 74, while seated in an armchair at Dutch House in Surrey, now known as Kew Palace. Her eldest son, the Prince Regent, was present, holding her hand. She was buried in the royal vault at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, on the 2nd day of December, 1888. She is the longest-serving female consort and second longest-serving consort in British history, after Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, having served as such from her marriage on September 8, 1761, to her death on November 17, 1818, a total of 57 years and 70 days. On the day before her death, the Queen dictated her will to her husband's secretary, Sir Herbert Taylor, appointing him and Lord Arden as her executors. At her death, her personal estate was valued at less than £140,000, equivalent to £12,300,000 in 2020, with her jewels accounting for the greater portion of her assets. In her will, proven at Doctors' Commons on the 8th day of January 1819, the Queen bequeathed her husband the jewels she had received from him, unless he remained in his state of insanity, in which case the jewels were to become an heirloom of the House of Hanover. Other jewels, including some given to Charlotte by the Nawab of Arcot, were to be evenly distributed among her surviving daughters. The furnishings and fixtures at the royal residence at Frogmore, along with live and dead stock on the estates, were bequeathed to her daughter, Augusta Sophia, along with the Frogmore property, unless its maintenance would prove too expensive for her daughter, in which case it was to revert to the crown. Her daughter Sophia inherited the royal lodge. Certain personal assets that the queen had brought from Mecklenburg-Strelitz were to revert to the senior branch of that dynasty, while the remainder of her assets, including her books, linen, art objects, and china, were to be evenly divided among her surviving daughters. At the queen's death, the Prince Regent claimed Charlotte's jewels, and on his death, they were in turn claimed by his heir, William IV. On William's death, Charlotte's bequest then sparked a protracted dispute between her granddaughter, Queen Victoria, who claimed the jewels as the property of the British crown, and Charlotte's now eldest surviving son, Ernest Augustus, King of Hanover, who claimed the jewels by right of being the most senior male member of the House of Hanover. The dispute would not be resolved in Ernest's lifetime. Eventually, in 1858, over 20 years after the death of William IV, and nearly 40 years after Charlotte's death, the matter was decided in favor of Ernest's son, George, upon which Victoria had the jewels given into the custody of the Hanoverian ambassador. The rest of Charlotte's property was sold at auction from May to August 1819. Her clothes, furniture, and even her snuff were sold by Christie's. It is highly unlikely that her husband ever knew of her death. He died blind, deaf, lame, and insane 14 months later. Today, many places around the world have been named after her. Some of them include Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island, Canada, Queen Charlotte Bay in West Falkland, Queen Charlotte Sound in South Island, New Zealand, Charlottesville in Virginia, Charlotte in North Carolina, USA, and Mecklenburg County, Virginia, USA. In closing, the question of whether Queen Charlotte was a black queen remains a subject of ongoing debate. However, her lineage, which traces back to Margarita de Castro y Sousa, a member of a black branch of Portuguese nobility, presents compelling clues. Combined with her portraits, contemporary descriptions, and the political context of her time, there is strong evidence to suggest that Queen Charlotte may indeed have had African ancestry. Whether history has tried to blur those lines or not, one thing is clear: Queen Charlotte's story matters. It challenges our perception of royal history, forces us to re-examine narratives we've long accepted, and reminds us that black heritage runs deeper and wider than many realize, even into the British monarchy itself. She may not have been publicly celebrated as a black queen in her time, but today, her story opens the door to a broader truth, that black history has always been deeply woven into the fabric of royal and global narratives. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel as we continue to uncover the forgotten chapters of our shared history. Once again, thanks for watching. See you in our next video.